They say family is blood, but on the night the temperature dropped to 20 below zero, my blood was the only thing they wanted to spill. I wasn't just an outcast. I was the price of their survival. Dragged up the jagged cliffs of the whispering peaks, stripped of my dignity, and left bound to a frozen altar, I waited for death. I waited for the monster of the north to tear me apart. But when the beast finally came, he didn't want my flesh. He wanted the one thing my own pack was too blind to see. He wanted me. And the moment he found my scent in the snow, the world didn't end. It began to burn. This is the story of how the unwanted runt became the queen of the north. The wind on the northern face of the whispering peaks didn't just blow. It bit. It chewed through layers of wool and bit straight into the marrow. For Audrey, stumbling barefoot over the shale and ice, the cold was no longer a sensation. It was a heavy, numbing weight that made her legs feel like lead pillars. "Keep moving," a rough voice barked from behind her. Audrey didn't turn. She knew the face of her tormentor too well. It was Gavin, the alpha of the Stone River Pack, the man who had once promised her father on his deathbed that he would look after the pack's orphans. But promises in Stone River were like the autumn leaves. They rotted as soon as the snow fell. "Please," Audrey whispered, though the wind stole the sound before it left her chapped lips. Her white ceremonial dress, thin as gauze, whipped violently around her legs. It was a mockery, a bridal gown for a funeral. "Don't waste your breath, Omega," Gavin sneered, shoving her forward. She fell hard, her knees scraping against the jagged ice. "We have to reach the altar of frost before midnight. If the beast doesn't get his tribute, the blizzard won't stop. The pack will starve." Audrey pushed herself up, her hands trembling uncontrollably. This was the logic of Stone River. When the winter was too harsh, when the elk didn't migrate, they didn't look for better hunting grounds. They looked for someone to blame. And who better than Audrey, the late bloomer? The Omega with no wolf, no scent, and no family to defend her. They called it a sacrifice to the spirit of the North. But everyone knew the rumors. The Northern Territory wasn't ruled by spirits. It was ruled by him, the Alpha King, the one they called the White Wolf. Rumor had it he was a feral savage who demanded flesh in exchange for mercy. "Why me, Gavin?" she asked, her voice cracking as they reached the plateau. "I've served the pack. I cleaned the lodge. I raised your sister's pups when she was sick." Gavin stopped. The plateau was desolate, a flat expanse of ice, dominated by a single jagged stone pillar, the altar. He grabbed Audrey by her upper arm, his grip bruising. "Because you are expendable, Audrey," he said, his eyes devoid of any humanity. "You have no wolf. You consume resources and give nothing back. And Sarah needs to eat. My pups need to eat. If sacrificing one useless girl saves the pack, I'll sleep just fine tonight." He dragged her to the stone pillar. He didn't use chains. He used heavy industrial zip ties he had pulled from his pocket. A cruel modern touch that made the ancient ritual feel even more sordid. He bound her wrists behind the stone, forcing her to her knees in the snow. "Gavin, please," she finally screamed, the terror breaking through the numbness. "Don't leave me here. I'll freeze before he even comes. Please." Gavin didn't look back. He turned his fur-lined collar up against the wind and began the descent. "Goodbye, Audrey. Pray it's quick." And then she was alone. The silence of the peak was louder than the wind. It was a vacuum that sucked the hope right out of her chest. Audrey slumped against the stone, the zip ties biting into her skin. She tried to summon heat, tried to find that spark of a wolf that every shifter was supposed to have, but there was nothing. just a hollow, human emptiness. I'm going to die, she thought. I'm 22 years old, and I'm going to die because I wasn't enough. Time lost its meaning. It could have been 10 minutes or 10 hours. Her vision began to blur, the white snow turning into a grey tunnel. Her heart rate slowed, a sluggish drum beating a retreat. Sleep, her mind whispered. Just close your eyes. She let her head fall forward, her chin resting on her chest. The cold wasn't painful anymore. It felt warm like a bath. Snap. The sound was sharp, cracking through the haze of hypothermia. It wasn't the wind. It was the sound of a heavy boot breaking a layer of ice. Audrey forced her eyes open, but her eyelashes were frozen together. Through the slits, she saw a shadow. It was massive. Far too large to be a human, yet it stood on two legs. It emerged from the blizzard, like a wraith cutting through the swirling snow. The beast. He didn't move like Gavin or the other wolves of Stone River. He moved with a predatory stillness, a terrifying grace. He stopped 10 feet away from her. Audrey wanted to beg, to scream, but her throat was frozen shut. She could only watch as the figure stepped closer. He was a man, or at least he looked like one. He wore a heavy tactical coat, black as midnight, unzipped to reveal a dark sweater underneath. His pants were military-grade, tucked into heavy combat boots. But it was his face that froze the breath in her lungs. He was strikingly, brutally handsome. High cheekbones, a jawline that could cut glass, and eyes that glowed with a feral electric blue luminosity in the darkness. His dark hair was dusted with snow. He looked less like a savage beast and more like a god of war descended to earth. He didn't look at her face. He looked at the zip ties. A low growl vibrated in his chest, a sound so deep Audrey felt it in the soles of her feet. "Pathetic," he rumbled. His voice was a baritone scrape of gravel and velvet. He stepped closer, crouching down in front of her. The heat radiating off him was immense, a furnace in the storm. "Another offering from the cowards in the valley," he muttered, reaching out. His hand was large, his fingers calloused. He didn't touch the ties. He reached for her chin, tilting her head up. Audrey flinched, expecting pain. But his touch was gentle, shockingly so. He leaned in, inhaling deeply near her neck. Audrey held her breath. This was it. He was checking the quality of the meat. He was going to rip her throat out. The stranger froze. His blue eyes widened, the pupils blowing wide until his eyes were almost black. He inhaled again, deeper this time, his nose brushing the sensitive skin behind her ear. "Vanilla," he whispered, his voice sounding dazed. "And winter, jasmine." He pulled back, staring at her with an intensity that terrified her more than Gavin's cruelty ever had. He wasn't looking at her like she was food anymore. He was looking at her like a man who had been starving for 1,000 years and just found a feast. "Who left you here?" he demanded. The anger in his voice wasn't directed at her. It was a physical force, directed at the world. Gavin," she managed to wheeze out. "Stone River." "Stone River," he repeated, testing the name like a curse. "They left this to die." He stood up abruptly, and for a second, Audrey thought he was leaving. But he reached into his boot and pulled out a jagged black steel knife. In one fluid motion, he was behind her. "He's going to slit my throat from behind," she thought. "It's a mercy kill." The knife slashed down. Her arms fell free. The circulation rushed back into her hands with agonizing needles of pain. She slumped forward, too weak to hold herself up. She waited to hit the ice. She never did. Strong arms caught her before she touched the ground. He scooped her up effortlessly, lifting her against his chest as if she weighed nothing more than a snowflake. She was pressed against the warmth of his coat, the smell of pine rain and raw power flooding her senses. "You're cold," he stated, his jaw tight. "Your heart is barely beating. Are you going to eat me?" she whispered, the delirium taking over. The man looked down at her. The feral glow in his eyes softened just a fraction. "No, little one," he said. "I'm not going to eat you. But the man who put you on this rock, him I might eat." He turned, carrying her away from the stone riverlands, deeper into the forbidden territory of the north. "My name is Roman," he said, though she was already fading into darkness. "And you, little Omega, are never going back to that valley again." Audrey's head lolled against his shoulder. As the blackness took her, she felt a strange sensation deep in her chest. A flutter, a spark. For the first time in her life, the inner wolf she thought was dead stirred. It didn't howl, it purred. And then she knew no more. Consciousness returned to Audrey in slow, confused waves. She expected the biting sting of the wind. She expected the hardness of the ice and the final crushing jaws of the beast. Instead, she felt silk. Smooth, impossibly soft fabric against her cheek. And warmth. A heavy, encompassing warmth that smelled of cedarwood and burning birch. Audrey gasped, bolting upright. Pain flared in her head, a sharp throb that made her vision swim. She wasn't on the mountain. She was in a room that looked larger than the entire communal lodge back at Stone River. The walls were made of dark, polished stone, and floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a landscape of snow-covered pines, stretching endlessly under a grey sky. A fire roared in a massive stone hearth across the room. "You're awake," the voice came from the shadows near the door. Audrey scrambled back against the massive headboard, pulling the duvet up to her chin. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Roman stepped into the light. Without the snowstorm obscuring him, he was even more terrifying. He was huge, filling the room with a suffocating masculine presence. He had changed out of his tactical gear into a simple black t-shirt and grey sweatpants, but the casual clothes did nothing to hide the lethal power coiled in his muscles. "Where am I?" Audrey's voice was a dry, raspy whisper. Is this the afterlife?" Roman's lips twitched, almost forming a smile, but it didn't reach his intense blue eyes. He walked over to the bedside table and poured a glass of water from a crystal pitcher. "No, little one. This is Blackwood Hall, my home." He held the glass out to her. Audrey stared at the water, then at him. "You're the White Wolf, the king." "I am. You didn't eat me." "I told you I wouldn't." He sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under his weight. He was close enough that she could smell that intoxicating scent again. Rain, pine, and something uniquely him. It made her head spin. "Drink. You're severely dehydrated." She took the glass with trembling hands. As she drank, she noticed the bruises on her wrists where the zip ties had been. They were already covered in a greenish salve. "Why?" she asked, lowering the glass. "Why save me? I'm a defect. An Omega with no wolf. I'm useless." Roman's expression darkened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 5 degrees. "Who told you that, Gavin?" Audrey looked down at her lap. "Everyone. My parents died when I was 5. Since then, I've just been a mouth to feed. I couldn't shift. I couldn't hunt. They said my wolf died in the womb. They lied." The door opened, and a frantic-looking man in a white lab coat bustled in. He was older, with wire-rimmed glasses and greying hair. He carried a medical tablet. "Alpha," the doctor said, bowing his head quickly to Roman, before looking at Audrey with wide, curious eyes. "The toxicology report is back. You were right to have me run a full panel." Roman stood up, crossing his arms. "Tell her Dr. Arris." Dr. Arris adjusted his glasses, looking at Audrey with a mixture of pity and professional anger. "Miss Audrey, my name is Dr. Arris. I've analyzed your blood. You aren't wolfless. You have high levels of silver nitrate and masked wolfsbane in your system." Audrey blinked. "What?" "It's a suppressant," Roman growled, his voice vibrating with a rage so potent the glass on the bedside table rattled. "Someone has been poisoning you. Specifically, they've been dosing you with small amounts for years, just enough to keep your wolf in a coma, just enough to keep you weak, submissive, and unable to shift." Audrey felt the blood drain from her face. "But only the Alpha has access to the medical supplies. Only Gavin." "Exactly," Roman said. He turned to the window, staring out at the frozen landscape, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "He didn't just abandon you, Audrey. He systematically crippled you. He stole your wolf." "But why?" Audrey whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I was a child. Why would he do that to a child?" Roman turned back to her. His eyes were glowing that electric blue again. "That is what I intend to find out. But know this. The wolf inside you isn't dead. She's sleeping. And now that you are here under my protection, she is going to wake up." He walked back to the bed, leaning down until his face was inches from hers. He raised a hand, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The touch sent a jolt of electricity straight to her core, making her toes curl. "Rest now," he commanded softly. "You are safe here. Anyone who wants to hurt you will have to go through me. And I have never lost a fight." As he left the room with the doctor, Audrey sank back into the pillows. Her mind was reeling with the revelation. She wasn't broken. She was suppressed. And for the first time in 17 years, she felt a distinct, angry scratch inside her chest. Her wolf was listening. 2 days passed. Audrey's recovery was rapid, aided by the nutrient-rich food and supplements Dr. Arris provided to flush the poison from her system. The staff at Blackwood Hall treated her with a strange mix of deference and curiosity. To them, she was the mystery woman the king had carried in from the storm. On the 3rd morning, Audrey felt strong enough to leave her room. She found a set of clothes left for her soft cashmere sweaters, leggings, and thick socks. They were expensive, far nicer than anything she had ever touched in Stone River. She ventured out into the hallway. The fortress was a blend of ancient stone architecture and ultra-modern luxury. It was quiet, massive, and intimidating. She followed the smell of roasted coffee down a grand staircase, ending up in a sprawling, open-concept kitchen and dining area. A group of people sat at a long wooden table. They stopped talking the moment she entered. There were 3 men, large, muscular, clearly high-ranking warriors, and 1 woman. The woman was beautiful in a sharp, dangerous way. She had sleek blonde hair, icy green eyes, and sat with the posture of a queen. "So," the woman said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "the stray finally leaves the kennel." One of the men, a rugged guy with a scar across his nose, nudged the woman. "Cut it out, Lydia." He looked at Audrey and gave a tentative nod. "Morning. I'm Silas. Roman's beta." Audrey gripped the railing of the stairs. "Hi, I'm Audrey." Lydia stood up, smoothing her tight leather skirt. She walked over to the bottom of the stairs, looking Audrey up and down with a sneer. "We know who you are. The charity case from Stone River. Roman has a bad habit of picking up broken things. But don't get comfortable, honey. Once the snow melts, he'll send you to the city shelter with the rest of the refugees." Audrey shrank back. This was familiar territory. This was how the elite she-wolves at Stone River used to talk to her. I didn't ask to be here. No, you didn't. Lydia stepped closer, lowering her voice. But you're here now, eating our food, distracting our king. Roman needs a strong mate, a Luna who can lead armies, not a trembling little mouse who can't even shift. Do us all a favor and stay out of his way. Is that a threat, Lydia? The voice boomed from the doorway behind the kitchen. Roman stood there, leaning against the doorframe. He was dressed in a dark suit, looking like the billionaire CEO he was rumored to be in the human world. But the energy rolling off him was pure predator. Lydia stiffened, turning around with a forced smile. Alpha, I was just welcoming our guest. Roman pushed off the doorframe and walked into the room. The air seemed to get heavier with every step he took. He walked right past Lydia as if she didn't exist, and stopped at the bottom of the stairs looking up at Audrey. You look better, he said, his eyes softening. Thank you, Audrey whispered. Roman turned to the table. Silas, clear the room. I want to eat breakfast with Audrey. Alone. Lydia's mouth fell open. Roman, we have the border reports to review. I said, get out. Roman didn't shout. He didn't have to. The Alpha command, laced in his voice, hit the room like a physical shockwave. The warriors scrambled to their feet. Silas grabbed Lydia by the arm and dragged the protesting woman out of the kitchen. When they were alone, Roman sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. I apologize for Lydia. She is ambitious. Her father is on the council, and she has been trying to warm my bed for 3 years. Audrey walked down the last few steps. She's right, though. I'm not like you all. I don't belong in a castle. Roman closed the distance between them in a heartbeat. He reached out, gripping her waist. His hands were large, hot, and possessive. He pulled her flush against his suit. You are right. You don't belong in a castle. He murmured, his blue eyes searching hers. You belong with me, wherever I am. Audrey's breath hitched. Roman, why you barely know me? My wolf knows you, he said, his voice dropping to a gravelly growl. From the moment I smelled you on that peak, Ares has been pacing. You are my mate, Audrey. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Mate. It was the most sacred bond a shifter could have. It was a myth to most a fairy tale. But I'm broken, she stammered. I can't be a Luna. I can't even shift. We will fix that, Roman promised. And once you shift, once you see what you truly are, you will realize that Stone River didn't banish a mouse. They banished a dragon. Before Audrey could respond, the kitchen door burst open again. Silas ran in his face, pale. Alpha, Silas panted. We have a problem. Perimeter breach. Sector 4. Roman didn't let go of Audrey. Rogues! No! Silas shook his head grimly. Stone River. Gavin is at the border. He claims we stole his property. He's demanding we return the girl. Roman's face transformed. The handsome man vanished, replaced by the monster of the north. His lips pulled back in a snarl that exposed lengthened canines. He wants her back. Roman laughed, a dark, chilling sound. Let's go say hello. The war room at Blackwood Hall was a fortress within a fortress. Maps of the territory were spread across a digital table. Roman stood at the head, radiating a fury that kept everyone at a distance. Audrey sat in the corner, wrapped in a blanket. Roman had refused to leave her behind, insisting she stay where he could see her. "Gavin is claiming you ran away," Silas reported, pointing to the map. "He's brought 20 enforcers. They are waiting at the bridge." "He tied me to a rock to die," Audrey cried out, her voice trembling. "How can he say I ran away?" "Because he realized his mistake," Roman said coldly. He tapped the screen, bringing up a file. "While you were sleeping, I had my intelligence team dig into your background. I wanted to know why a pack alpha would poison a child." He looked at Audrey. "What do you know about your parents?" "Not much," Audrey said. "My dad was a beta. My mom was nobody. They died in a car crash." "That," Roman said. Sliding a document across the table toward her is another lie. Audrey picked up the paper. It was an old birth certificate, yellowed with age, attached to a death report. "Father Elias Thorne, Mother Seraphina Vance." Audrey shook her head. "I don't know these names." "You wouldn't," Silas interjected, his voice awed. "The Vance family were the original alphas of Stone River. 20 years ago there was a coup, a violent takeover." Roman nodded. "Gavin didn't inherit the alpha position, Audrey. He stole it. He murdered the alpha and his mate. But they had a daughter, a child who vanished in the chaos." Roman walked over to her, kneeling, so he was eye level. "Gavin kept you because he couldn't kill you. If the pack knew the true heir was alive, his claim to power would crumble. So he poisoned you to hide your scent, to keep your alpha blood from manifesting. He made you a servant in your own house." The room spun. Audrey felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. I'm the alpha." "You are the rightful alpha of Stone River," Roman said firmly. "And Gavin just realized that if you survived the cold, the poison will wear off. If you shift, the truth comes out. He's not here to take you back, Audrey. He's here to finish the job." Terror, cold and sharp, pierced through her. "He'll kill everyone. If he has 20 enforcers. Roman, you have to give me to him." Roman froze. "What?" Audrey stood up, the blanket falling from her shoulders. "I won't let your pack bleed for me. I'm just one person. If I go out there, he leaves you alone." "Sit down, Audrey," Roman warned, his voice low. "No." Panic seized her. She felt like a curse. Everywhere she went, death followed. She turned and ran for the door. "Audrey!" She burst into the hallway, sprinting toward the main exit. She had to save them. She had to end this. She made it to the heavy oak doors, throwing her weight against them. The cold winter air blasted her face. She stumbled out into the snow, aiming for the gates. A blur of black motion cut her off. Roman landed in front of her, moving faster than the eye could track. He didn't look like a man anymore. His eyes were fully black. His canines extended his claws out. He grabbed her shoulders, not gently this time. "You think you can leave me?" He roared, the sound echoing off the mountains. "You think I will let you walk to your death?" "You don't understand," Audrey screamed, hitting his chest with her fists. "I'm nothing. I'm just trouble." "You are my soul," Roman shouted back, shaking her once. "You are my mate. If you die, I burn the world down. Do you understand? There is no version of this story where I let him touch you." He pulled her into him, crushing her against his hard chest. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling deeply, trying to calm his beast. "Stop running from me," he groaned against her skin. "Let me be your shield." Audrey sobbed, her fight draining away. She clung to his coat. And then it happened. The stress, the fear, the proximity to her mate, and the fading poison, it all collided. A searing heat exploded in Audrey's belly. It wasn't the subtle scratch from before. It was a roar. Her bones cracked. Her vision turned red. She screamed, falling to her knees in the snow. Audrey! Roman was there instantly, catching her. She looked up at him. Her brown eyes were gone. In their place were irises of brilliant glowing violet, the mark of an alpha female. Roman! She gasped, her voice sounding like two voices layered on top of each other, human and wolf. It hurts. Roman looked at her, pride and awe warring on his face. He stood up, shielding her body with his own, as he looked toward the gates where Gavin's trucks were approaching. "Let it hurt, baby," Roman whispered. "That's the power waking up. Shift. Shift and show them what a queen looks like." From the depths of Audrey's throat, a howl began to build a sound that had been silenced for 17 years, ready to shatter the windows of Stone River. The pain was not a sensation. It was a restructuring of reality. Audrey felt her human anatomy liquefying her bones, snapping and reforming with the loud, wet cracks of gunfire. She writhed in the snow, her back arching as the wolf that had been chemically suppressed for 17 years tore its way to the surface. Roman stood over her, growling at his beta Silas to keep the perimeter secure. "Let it happen, Audrey," Roman urged, his voice thick with the duality of man and beast. "Don't fight it." With a final agonizing scream that morphed into a guttural snarl, Audrey's human form vanished. In her place stood a creature of myth. She was massive, easily the size of a fully grown male alpha, but her fur was pure, blinding white, like the untouched snow on the highest peaks. And her eyes, they were not the yellow of a common wolf, nor the blue of Roman's. They were a glowing electric violet. Silas gasped, lowering his weapon. "A spirit wolf. I thought they were extinct." There was no time for awe. The iron gates of Blackwood Hall shuddered as a heavy Range Rover smashed through the locking mechanism, followed by 2 armored trucks. Gavin had arrived. The vehicles screeched to a halt in the courtyard, their headlights cutting through the blizzard. 20 armed enforcers poured out, shifting instantly into wolves, a mix of greys and browns, snarling and snapping. Gavin stepped out of the lead vehicle. He didn't shift. He held a customized Remington shotgun, his face twisted in a mask of arrogant rage. "Give me the girl, Roman," Gavin shouted over the wind. "She's property of Stone River. You are violating the treaty." Roman didn't speak. He simply ripped his shirt off his body, exploding into fur and muscle. In seconds, a gigantic midnight black wolf stood where the king had been. Ares. But before Roman could charge the white wolf, Audrey stepped forward. She didn't run. She stalked. Her paws hit the ground with the heavy thud of impending judgment. She looked at Gavin, the man who had starved her, beaten her, and left her to freeze. Gavin laughed nervously, raising the shotgun. "What is this, a new pet Roman? You think a pretty white dog scares me?" He didn't recognize her. He didn't recognize the scent because the poison was gone. All he smelled was raw, unadulterated alpha power. Audrey let out a roar that wasn't just sound. It was a weapon. The alpha voice. It hit the Stone River wolves like a physical blow. Half of them whimpered and dropped to their bellies, forced into submission by a bloodline far superior to their own. Gavin's eyes widened. "No, it's impossible." He pumped the shotgun. "Kill it! Kill the beast!" he screamed at his men. 3 loyal enforcers lunged at Audrey. Roman snarled, preparing to intercept, but he stopped. He watched. Audrey moved like quicksilver. She ducked under the first wolf's jaws, snapping her teeth around his throat and tossing him 10 feet into the air like a rag doll. She spun her heavy tail, whipping the second wolf across the eyes, blinding him before slamming her shoulder into the third with the force of a freight train. She was efficiency incarnate. She wasn't fighting like a new shifter. She was fighting like a creature born of violence. Gavin panicked. He leveled the shotgun at her head. "Die, you mistake!" Boom! The shot echoed through the valley. But Audrey hadn't frozen. She had anticipated. She sidestepped with supernatural speed, the buckshot kicking up snow where she had been a millisecond before. Before Gavin could rack the slide for a second shot. She was on him. She pinned him to the frozen cobblestones, her massive paws on his chest, her jaws clamped around the steel barrel of the shotgun. With a sickening crunch, she bit through the metal, rendering the weapon useless. She brought her face down to his, her violet eyes burning into his soul. She growled a low, vibrating sound that formed words in his mind through the pack link, a link he thought severed. "Hello, Gavin." Gavin's face went white. He dropped the ruined gun, scrambling backward in the snow. "Audrey!" She threw her head back and howled a sound of victory that signaled the end of his reign. Roman trotted to her side, rubbing his massive black head against her white neck. The contrast was stark and beautiful. Night and day. King and queen. The remaining Stone River wolves shifted back into their human forms, kneeling in the snow, bowing their heads to the ground. They knew. The true Alpha had returned. The takeover of Stone River was bloodless. When the true Alpha returns, the pack does not fight. The pack follows. The convoy of Blackwood SUVs, led by Roman's personal armored Cadillac Escalade, rolled into the Stone River territory just as the sun began to rise over the mountains. Audrey sat in the passenger seat, dressed in a sharp black suit Roman had provided. She looked nothing like the girl in the rag dress who had been dragged up the mountain 3 days ago. They pulled up to the pack lodge. The entire community had been summoned. Hundreds of wolves stood in the courtyard, whispering, fearful. They had heard the rumors. Audrey stepped out of the car. The silence was deafening. She walked up the steps of the lodge, Roman a shadow at her right shoulder. She stood on the podium where Gavin used to give his speeches. Gavin was there too, kneeling in chains, guarded by Silas. Audrey looked out at the crowd. She saw the faces of people who had spat on her, the women who had tripped her in the hallways, the men who had laughed when she was forced to eat scraps from the garbage. "Raise your heads," Audrey commanded. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of the Alpha command. Slowly they looked up. "You all knew," Audrey said, her gaze sweeping over them. "You watched a child starve. You watched me freeze. You told yourselves it was necessary for the pack's survival. But it wasn't survival. It was cowardice." A woman in the front row, the head cook who used to deny Audrey breakfast, burst into tears. "We were afraid," Gavin said. "Gavin is finished." Audrey cut her off. She turned to the kneeling man. Gavin looked up, his lip bleeding, his eyes wild. "You can't kill me, Audrey. I am your uncle. Your mother's brother." The crowd gasped. Another secret revealed. "Family," Audrey said, tasting the word like poison. "You killed my parents for power. You tortured your niece for sport. You have no family." "I did what I had to do," Gavin spat. "You were weak. A girl couldn't lead Stone River." "And yet," Roman stepped forward, his hand resting possessively on the small of Audrey's back. "Here she stands, a spirit wolf, the strongest shifter this continent has seen in a century. And here you are on your knees." Roman turned to Audrey. "He is yours to judge my queen. What is the sentence?" The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. The traditional punishment for treason was death, a public execution. Audrey looked at Gavin. She saw the fear in his eyes. She remembered the cold of the mountain. She remembered the zip ties. "Death is too easy," Audrey said softly. You wanted to sacrifice me to the cold. You wanted me to be an outcast. She pointed to the gate. Strip him of his rank, Audrey commanded. Strip him of his name. Exile him. No, Gavin screamed. Exile for a wolf was a slow, maddening death. Without a pack link, a wolf would go insane within months. Kill me. Just kill me. Get him out of my sight, Audrey said, turning her back on him. Silas and 2 enforcers dragged the screaming man away. The Stone River pack watched him go. Then one by one, they dropped to one knee. Alpha Audrey. The chant began low at first, then rising to a roar. Alpha Audrey, Alpha Audrey. Audrey felt the pack link snap into place. Hundreds of minds connecting to hers, seeking guidance, seeking protection. It was overwhelming, a flood of emotion. She swayed her knees, buckling. Roman caught her instantly. He swept her up into his arms, silencing the crowd with a glare. The Queen is tired, Roman announced. We are going home. He didn't take her inside the Stone River Lodge. He carried her back to his car. To him, Stone River was just territory. She was his home. The month that followed the liberation of Stone River was a blur of ink treaties and reconstruction. The physical battle against Gavin had lasted only minutes, but the war to rebuild 2 shattered packs into one cohesive empire was a daily grind. For Audrey, the transition from the unwanted cellar rat to the Queen of the North was jarring. She often woke up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, grasping for the thin, scratchy blanket of her old cot, only to find her fingers tangling in Egyptian cotton sheets. She would reach out into the darkness and find warm, solid muscle instead of freezing stone. Roman was always there. Even in sleep, his arm was thrown heavily over her waist, anchoring her to the bed, anchoring her to reality. On the morning of the winter solstice coronation, the sky above Blackwood Hall was a piercing, cloudless blue. The snow on the peaks didn't look like a threat anymore. It looked like diamonds dusted over the world to celebrate her ascension. Audrey stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master suite. She ran her fingers over the silk of her gown. It was white, a deliberate choice. The last time she had worn white, it was a thin, ragged shift intended to be her burial shroud. Today, it was a masterpiece of design, heavy with embroidery and pearls fitted to accentuate the strength she had regained. The high collar hid the faint scars on her neck, but she knew they were there. You are staring at the past again. Roman's voice came from the doorway. He was already dressed in his ceremonial alpha blacks, a dark suit cut with military precision, adorned with the silver crest of the Blackwood lineage on the lapel. He walked into the room, the heavy thud of his boots on the hardwood floor, sending a familiar thrill through her. He stopped behind her, his blue eyes locking with her violet ones in the mirror. I'm not staring at the past, Audrey whispered, leaning back against his chest. I'm saying goodbye to it. Roman wrapped his arms around her, his hands splaying over her stomach. Good, because the council is waiting. The alphas from the East and West territories arrived an hour ago. They are curious. They want to see the spirit wolf. Audrey felt a flicker of anxiety. They want to see if I'm a freak or a fraud. Let them look, Roman growled, dipping his head to kiss the sensitive spot behind her ear. Let them see that the Stone River bloodline didn't end with Gavin. It evolved. You aren't just an alpha, Audrey. You are an anomaly. You are the only wolf in existence who survived the Frost Altar without shifting. That kind of strength, it scares them. Does it scare you? She asked, turning in his arms to face him. Roman looked down at her, his expression softening into that rare, unguarded look he reserved only for her. He reached up, tracing the line of her jaw with his thumb. "Terrifies me," he admitted honestly. "Every time you walk into a room, my wolf goes feral. I spent 10 years thinking power was about territory and armies. Then I found you, half frozen on a rock, and I realized I knew nothing about true power." He kissed her, then deep, slow, and reassuring. It wasn't a kiss of lust, though the undercurrent was always there. It was a transfer of strength. "I am here. You are here. We are one." "Come," he said, pulling back. "It's time to take your throne." The grand hall of Blackwood Fortress had been transformed. The banners of Stone River, a grey mountain on a green field, hung alongside the Blackwood banners, a black pine on a silver field. The symbolism was clear. This was no longer a conquest. It was a union. Hundreds of wolves filled the hall. The air was thick with the scent of pine rain and the musk of powerful shifters. At the front of the room, on a raised dais, sat the Council of Elders, along with the visiting alphas. They sat in high-backed chairs, their faces unreadable masks of judgment. When the heavy oak doors groaned open, silence fell like a guillotine. Roman entered first, his presence commanding absolute respect. He walked with the predatory grace of a killer who chose peace. But he did not walk to the center alone. He held his hand out, and Audrey took it. As they walked down the aisle, the whispers started. "That's her, the one Gavin tried to kill. Look at her eyes. I've never seen that color." Audrey kept her chin high. She didn't look at the floor. She met the gaze of every wolf she passed. Among the crowd, she saw faces from her past. She saw the old pack doctor who had been forced to fabricate her medical records. He bowed low, shame radiating off him. She saw Silas Roman's beta standing guard with a proud grin. And then she saw Lydia. The blonde woman who had sneered at her in the kitchen just weeks ago was standing near the front row. Lydia looked impeccable as always, but her posture was brittle. As Audrey approached, Lydia hesitated. For a split second, defiance flashed in her green eyes. Audrey stopped. She didn't say a word. She simply let her wolf surface. A wave of pure alpha aura, cold, crisp, and smelling of ozone, rolled off her. It wasn't an attack. It was a statement. "I am the Queen." Lydia's defiance shattered. The blonde woman's knees buckled, and she sank into a deep curtsy, lowering her eyes to the floor. "Luna," she murmured, her voice trembling. Audrey nodded once, acknowledging the submission, and continued to the dais. They reached the steps. An elderly man with white hair and a staff stood waiting. It was Elder Thomas, the keeper of the law. "We are gathered." Thomas's voice boomed, amplified by the acoustics of the stone hall, "to witness the unification of the North and the Valley, and to recognize the true heir of the Thorn bloodline." Thomas looked at Audrey. "Audrey of Stone River, you have returned from the dead. You have reclaimed your birthright. Do you swear to protect this pack, to feed them, before you feed yourself, and to bleed for them if the need arises?" "I swear it," Audrey said, her voice clear and steady. "And do you, Roman of Blackwood, swear to share your authority, to rule not above her, but beside her?" Roman looked at Audrey, his blue eyes burning. "I swear it. She is my equal in all things. My blood is her blood." Thomas nodded solemnly. He picked up a heavy velvet cushion. On it lay a crown not of gold, but of woven black steel and white silver twisted together like roots and branches. "Then rise," Thomas commanded. "Audrey the Spirit Wolf, Luna of the United North." He placed the crown on her head. It was heavy, a physical weight, to match the responsibility she now carried. The moment the metal touched her brow, the room erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was a roar. Hundreds of wolves shifted their voices, howling their acceptance. The sound vibrated in Audrey's chest, calling to her beast. She felt tears prick her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She looked out at the sea of people, her people, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel alone. The celebrations lasted well into the night. There was feasting music and dancing. But as the moon reached its zenith, high and full over the mountains, Roman signaled to her. They slipped away from the party, leaving the noise behind as they ascended the private staircase to the Alpha's tower. The room was quiet, lit only by the fire and the moonlight spilling through the glass walls. Roman locked the door, the click sounding final. The public performance was over. Now it was just them. Roman loosened his tie, tossing his jacket onto a chair. He walked toward her, the predator back in his eyes. "You were magnificent today." Audrey unpinned the heavy crown, setting it on the vanity. She turned to him, kicking off her heels. "I was terrified. I kept waiting for Gavin to burst through the doors." "Gavin is currently in a maximum security containment cell in the eastern wastes," Roman said, dismissively, closing the distance between them. "He will never hurt you again. No one will." He reached for her, his hands finding the zipper of her dress. Slowly, reverently, he lowered it. The silk pooled at her feet, leaving her in her lace underthings. The moonlight turned her skin to alabaster. Roman groaned low in his throat. "Do you have any idea how long I have waited for this? Since the moment I found you in the snow, I have wanted to claim you. But I waited. I needed you to be ready. I needed you to know you were safe." Audrey stepped closer, placing her hands on his chest, feeling the heavy thud of his heart. "I am ready, Roman. I don't want to wait anymore. I want the bond. I want to feel you in my mind. The mating bond. It was the final step. A biological and spiritual permanent connection. Once done, they would be able to hear each other's thoughts, feel each other's pain, and find each other anywhere on Earth. Roman lifted her effortlessly, carrying her to the massive bed. He laid her down, hovering over her, his weight supported by his arms. He looked at her as if she were the only source of light in the universe. "You are my soul, Audrey," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Before you, I was just a watchdog, guarding a frozen fence. You gave me a life. And you gave me a future," she whispered back, tilting her head to the side, baring the graceful curve of her neck to him. "Mark me, Roman. Make it real." Roman didn't hesitate. His eyes flashed that brilliant electric blue. He lowered his head, his breath hot against her cool skin. He kissed the pulse point once, twice, and then his canines lengthened. He bit down. It wasn't pain. It was a shock of pure energy, like being struck by lightning, but surviving it. Audrey gasped, her back arching off the mattress. The connection slammed into place. "Audrey." She heard his voice, not in her ears, but inside her mind. It was deep, resonant, and filled with a tidal wave of love and possessiveness. "Roman." She projected her thought back, feeling the barrier between their souls dissolve. She felt his fierce protectiveness, his awe of her, his burning desire. He pulled back, licking the mark to seal it. It healed instantly, leaving a silver scar in the shape of his bite, the mark of the Alpha King. Roman rested his forehead against hers, both of them panting as the endorphins flooded their systems. "It's done," he murmured. "You are mine, irrevocably." "And you are mine," she replied, running her hands through his dark hair. Audrey looked past him out the window at the snowy peaks of the Whispering Mountains. The place where she had almost died was now just a view from her bedroom window. The altar where she had been sacrificed was gone, buried under fresh snow. She had been the abandoned runt, the wolfless girl, the sacrifice. Now she lay in the arms of the most powerful man in the world, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling the power of the spirit wolf humming in her veins. The winter had tried to kill her, but the winter had failed. Audrey smiled, closing her eyes, as Roman pulled the duvet over them, cocooning them in warmth. "Let it snow," she whispered into the darkness. "I'm not cold anymore." And that is the end of Audrey and Roman's journey from the freezing cliffs of betrayal to the warm, unbreakable bond of the throne. Audrey proved that true power isn't about physical strength. It's about the resilience of the spirit. She took the stones thrown at her and built a queendom. This story reminds us that sometimes our darkest moments are just the setup for our greatest victories. Roman found his heart in the snow, and Audrey found her crown in the ice. If this finale gave you chills or made you emotional, please hit that like button. It really supports the channel and helps me create more long-form stories.